Good morning, everyone. My name is John Kennedy, and I'm the Director of Education and Training for the FBI National Academy Associates. Thank you for joining us today. Today's presentation is sponsored by our partner, Utility, is entitled Increasing Officer Safety and Enhancing Situational Awareness, Reducing Response Times When Every Second Counts. I'd like to thank Utility for their continued support, partnership, and commitment to law enforcement by sharing their expertise, technology, and information with our FBI National Academy Associates members and constituents. For those attendees who may not be familiar with the FBI National Academy Associates, we are a nonprofit international organization of 16,500 senior law enforcement executives dedicated to providing our communities, states, countries, and the profession with the highest degree of law enforcement expertise, training, education, and information. It gives me great pleasure to turn the program over to our partner at Utility, Chief Jason Dombrowski. Chief, it's all yours.
Thank you, John, and welcome to today's discussion. I'm Jason Dombrowski, and prior to joining Utility as the Director of Law Enforcement Relations, I served as the Chief of Police for the city of West Lafayette, Indiana, and I'm also a graduate of the National Academy Session 245. And today we're focused on providing you with practical insights into several innovative officer safety features made possible through the combination of technology and connectivity. We'll talk about how these features work and how they have led to quicker, life-saving response times. We all know that now we're not just managing day-to-day police activity. Agency leaders are managing nearly constant change as well. We also know that officer safety tools like modern body cameras can alleviate the uncertainty that comes along with the realities of contemporary policing. By providing an added layer of officer safety and real-time situational awareness. With this group of law enforcement professionals we've assembled today, we're all going to discuss how these tools allow for more informed decision-making during mission-critical moments. So let's begin and let's meet our panel. Chief Hayes, can you get us started today?
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Hayes. I'm the current police chief in Louisville, Colorado. If you're not familiar with our area, we're just northwest of Denver and just on this side of Boulder, Colorado. Prior to joining the Louisville Police Department as the chief in 2014, I served for 36 years at the Boulder Police Department, retired as deputy chief in 2014, and then came to Louisville.
All right, thank you, Chief. Sergeant Tom Naughton, can you start us off next?
Sure. My name's Tom Naughton. I'm a sergeant with St. Louis County Police Department. I've been here for 25 years, and I'm current camera systems administrator for the department. St. Louis County is a little bit unique. If you're not familiar with the area, we are roughly 523 square miles. 200 of such are unincorporated. The remaining area are governed by 88 municipalities with police services provided by 58 separate police agencies. County Police Department itself has 956 or 7 commissioned officers and 250 civilian support staff. As the administrator for the camera program, I oversee the day-to-day operations of the camera equipment, production of video used for prosecution and open records request. I currently have 620 body cameras, 325 in-car cameras, and about 90 comm systems out there in use. The current camera system unit for the County Police Department consists of me and one other commissioned police officer. We're in the works of expanding the unit and merging with another unit here in the near future. So hopefully we'll be able to expand some of the unique ways that we use this camera system here in the future.
Thank you, Sergeant. And also joining us today is Chief Will Johnson from the BNSF Railway Police. Chief?
Well, thank you, Jason. Will Johnson, Chief of Police for BNSF.
Railway PD. We service jurisdictions in 28 states and 3 Canadian provinces, largely in the Western United States. Before I joined BNSF Police Department last June, I spent 27 years in municipal policing, the majority of which in Arlington, Texas, where I served as police chief for 8 years. Presently, vice president for the International Association of Chiefs of Police and a past executive board member for Major City Chiefs of America. And I too am a proud member of the FBINA alumni, where I attended session 245 and was honored to serve as class president.
Thank you, Chief. And to start things off, let's talk about the tools and resources your agencies use to enhance situational awareness and increase officer safety. Chief Johnson, I know you're in the process of rolling out our new tools and resources. Why has this become a priority for your agency?
I think like many agencies, the question of whether or not body cameras plays a role in policing has largely been answered for us by society. But I can tell you that as we look to deploy a body camera system, we were looking for more than just capturing video evidence. We were looking for a force multiplier, if you will. And so there was 3 primary technological capacity or opportunities that the utility solution offered us. One was, the ability to create geofences so that we could understand when our cops entered into a certain location. Unlike many maybe municipal police departments, our dispatching coordinates are often classified by miles, not necessarily a platted, zoned residential location inside a community. And we often work alone. And so the officer down feature clearly added value from our perspective so that we could have that extra layer of notification to our dispatch center should one of our officers activate that security feature by being in some sort of physical altercation. And then finally, because we're geographically dispersed across so many states, as I've already described, the GPS precision by which we can monitor our staff and make sure that we can guide resources in a mutual aid environment to their location based on proximity in a mapping solution was extraordinarily important. And we look forward to being able to implement that into the operational framework that we presently have.
Thanks, Chief. I think all of our panelists shared similar priorities when it comes to implementing these tools. And with that in mind, Chief Hayes, could you give us insight into how utilities officer safety features played a part in your team's vendor selection process?
Sure, thank you. And as you know, we went through a pretty extensive RFP process last year, the year before, and some of the features that we looked for was certainly the officer safety features. We like the CAD interface with utility, where we can set the camera to go off when an officer is arriving at a serious call, so he or she doesn't have yet something else to remember. We can do a setting in CAD that will activate those cameras. The officer down feature, we are fortunate that we have not faced that yet, but it's certainly critical for officers in the field. The inside camera mount was very, very important to us. As we know, with the work that our officers do, sometimes those cameras get knocked off, and sometime at the most inopportune time, they might be struggling with somebody. So with those cameras tucked safely away in shirts and in jackets, it makes everybody safer. We also purchased the interview room software and the camera, where again offers protection for the officers if they're in an interview with somebody. We know exactly what was said and what wasn't said, probably more importantly. And the real-time downloading, we're a fairly small city. We're only about 20,000 people, but even in Louisville, we have 2 waypoints, and one at the station and one at our city hall, which is in our downtown area. And the officers drive up and stop for a few minutes, and whatever footage they have on their camera is downloaded. The other feature that I liked about it, and I didn't know that when we purchased the utility system, and I jokingly refer to this, that even a chief can operate it. In Colorado, you all know that this will be a requirement. I think in 2023, we're ahead of the game. We have cameras, we've got them implemented. That's from the chief on down, and I've even got some videos that I've downloaded for scenes that I was at, and I could figure out a way to operate it. So that was real important to me.
Thank you, Chief. And I like that you mentioned the offloading feature, either through a waypoint, through a Wi-Fi connection, or straight from the field through a cellular connection is also available from the system. And when you talk about security, that instantaneous offload of having that uploaded directly to the cloud, a little bit different than maybe some other systems you looked at?
Yeah, the previous system that we had actually had the charging banks, and then it would download at the end of the officer's day, end of their shift, and that typically didn't work very well for us. Maybe the officer's back before the whatever was there got downloaded, and it just was something else for the officers to think about. And if they didn't put their camera back in one of those charging stations, then invariably the stuff didn't download, and we might be looking for a particular video. Where now we know when our officers go home, either, as you mentioned, via the cell connection, or when they come back to the police station, we know that we've got that footage and it's secure.
Thank you. Chief Johnson, because you recently went through the process of selecting a vendor, can you share what level of influence the officer safety features of the utility solution had in the overall decision-making process when selecting a body camera system?
Yeah, so, at the end of the day, all of us are trying to keep our staff as safe as possible. And clearly, our cops are working in extraordinarily difficult times, in harsh conditions. Certainly, with the level of national rhetoric on police reform, and certainly some of the associated First Amendment activities that have been taking place surrounding that topic, have not always been peaceful. Some of them largely have, but some of them have not. And so when we think about how do we create enhanced officer safety, we do it through policy, we do it through training, and we try to do it through force multiplication aspects through technology. And that's really what utility offered in this solution. And so everything from positional awareness of where officers are so that we can get responding officers to go there, to what y'all were just talking about the ability to not only upload the video, but the live streaming aspects of being able to see firsthand the critical incident that might be taking place. And there's a balance right there with how do we have streaming video to help inform incident commanders to get the right resources to help the cops that are on the front line, while also protecting, our employees' privacy too, so that there's strong rules and regulations about when live streaming can take place and when it can't take place, and auditing thereof. But then finally, just kind of the mapping features and the ability to create that geo fence, or those automatic triggers, if you will, whether it's connected to the lights or to the CAD system and to the violent calls for service, so that as a cop is bailing out of their car to address an armed subject, they don't have to worry about turning on a camera, because the camera is turning itself on based on CAD prioritization that they were dispatched to, or that, like I said, the lights coming on. All of those really feed into kind of the totality of the solution, rather than just capturing video evidence. Frankly, there's lots of solutions out there that just capture video evidence. It's the blended approach of all those different enhancements that we're talking about right now, I think, that really separated this solution, and certainly was the motivating factor of why we chose this.
Would it be fair to say that the integration of the technology into what you have explained as your operational needs were a significant factor?
Well, integration is critical, and it's also probably the most difficult piece of any technology project, frankly, right? Because it's the most unstable piece. It's the piece that can break the most. And so when you think about that integration, not only can it be done, but what is the relationship with the provider so that when you encounter problems that you can overcome them? This is the second utility body camera deployment that I've had in my career. And one of the main just kind of chief perspectives in the selection of this solution was, we've been in the fire together, right? We've worked through those interface solutions together, and I've seen what the company can do to overcome, just the technology challenges that are just inherent with technology, right? And so the interface, but also the support behind the interface, both of those coming together to create that kind of motivation for what the solution can do, and the type of support that you get whenever you hit a speed bump every now and then.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And we know that part of the process of implementing these tools is having interest and buy-in from your officers, really the everyday users of body-worn cameras in our communities. With that in mind, Chief Hayes, did your officers express interest in this technology and the features?
Absolutely. And again, in Colorado, I don't think it's mandatory now until 2023. We had a previous vendor and now, of course, utility, and we just didn't have any opposition. Our officers provide good customer service as law enforcement officers do, the majority of them across this great country. And we didn't do it, we certainly didn't do it in Louisville because we wanted to reduce officer complaints. Frankly, we don't get many of them. Our officers saw that as an opportunity to showcase, if you will, the good work that they do, what they have to go through on a daily basis with some of their contacts that don't go very well. And I think it also provides a layer of protection, or a layer of makes our community feel better that what their officers are doing is recorded, and it's maybe too bad that we've had to come to that in this country, that we don't maybe trust officers like we did at one point in our history. But I think for our officers, again, we didn't get any pushback at all. They see it as a great tool. Again, before it was even required in Colorado, because it's not yet, our officers were using it to document searches, consent searches, things that they would normally put in their reports and still put in their reports, but now they're backed up by a camera and for all to see.
It's a great point, Chief. And part of that buy-in can come from functionality in real life situations when officers and the community really see firsthand how features like the body-worn officer down feature can save lives. Sergeant Naughton, I haven't forgotten about you. We know you have an example of this from the St. Louis County Police Department. Can you share that experience with us today?
Yeah, sure. Back in April of last year, officers responded to a call for service in our Central County precinct. At the end of the call, one of the officers was returning to his patrol vehicle, which was parked a little bit of distance away from the dispatch location. As the officer neared his vehicle, he started to become faint and he collapsed to the pavement. The reportee from the original call for the service, she had witnessed the officer going down and went to his aid. Nearly about the same time that our dispatch center and the surrounding cars were alerted to the body worn down notification from the camera system, a citizen had started to use the officer's police radio to request for help. That incident occurred roughly around 8 p.m. I just happened to be working on a few things at home, so I had the Avail web system open. So I initiated a live stream of the officer's body camera. As that stream started to open, I could hear the female voice telling our dispatcher that the officer was down and that appeared to be having a seizure. With that information, I called our communications center and was able to inform them of what was actually happening right there on the scene. So that information was sent over to the officers that were responding, as well as EMS. probably one of the more important things about that, besides the response time being reduced and getting him aid, was this happened within the first 4 months of our deployment of the cameras. We had several accidental activations of the body worn down prior to that. It's January when we kicked this off, so the cold weather and having the body worn camera in the actual outer jacket, officers were like throwing the jackets in their cars or in the stations, and it was inadvertently setting off the body worn down. So it was important that that this happened the way it happened, and we were able to get that information out that this was actually a true medical emergency. I think the message got sent back out to these officers that really started seeing the body worn down as kind of like another car alarm going off on a parking lot. I mean, honestly, had that civilian not been there, witnessed the officer going down and been able to radio for help, the only course of any emergency services or aid that he would have received would have solely come from the body worn down feature. That was the only thing that sticks in my mind, and that message really got out to the officers that utilized this system. I do have a second example. It wasn't an officer that the body worn down rendered aid to, but a citizen of the county. This happened a couple months after that. The officer was traveling on one of our interstate highways and saw a motorist that needed some assistance. When he approached that vehicle, he observed that the person behind the wheel was unresponsive. He climbed inside the car and was able to start giving aid to the subject. And in doing so, his body was positioned in such a way that the body worn down went off. We live streamed his camera, and we could see that he was giving aid to a subject behind the wheel of a car. So we were able to notify our dispatch again and let them know exactly what was going on. We gave him his location because of the GPS. We were able to dispatch the responsible police agency for that area, as well as EMS. And so the body worn down not only helped, an officer in our first example, but a private citizen in the second one.
Sarge, the GPS factor of the body camera, you had mentioned, we all know when the officer down goes over the radio, everybody in every jurisdiction that's around is trying to get information, and they're en route, right? That's just what we do. And you had mentioned at one point that the difference between officers that were on the system in St. Louis County and maybe some other neighboring jurisdictions that didn't have that GPS feature, they kind of had a general idea of where the officer was by an address maybe, but that responding, that response was a bit different from those who actually could see turn by turn directions on where your officer was down.
Yeah, that's correct. When the officer initially went down, the citizen was giving out her address, and as I mentioned earlier, his car was parked a little bit a ways from the actual call location. So officers were dispatched to the address that the citizen was given, which was, the original call location a couple streets over. She later corrected herself when she realized the correct address there. But before that had even occurred, our officers actually knew exactly where he was at. When an aid call goes out, obviously everybody in the area will come. And the responding agencies that are not on the system, as you mentioned, they did not have that pinpoint accuracy of where the officer was located. You could actually see them drive past where the officer was the first time. So having that feature and being able to tell exactly where your officer and where his car is positioned, that's just incredible technology. It was a lifesaver in this event. So seeing it in action that night has truly made a believer of a lot of us here.
Yeah, thank you, Sergeant. Incredible story and testimonial. Thank you for sharing that. We have several of these real life experiences, and they really go a long way to ensuring both officers and the community understand the value of this technology. In thinking about the community, do you think that these tools and utilities ecosystem promote safety for the communities that you serve? Chief Hayes, I'd like your thoughts on that topic.
Yes, absolutely. Anything we can do to keep our first responders safe also makes our community members safe. We also had a couple of activations. I don't know that we had many of them, probably not, certainly not the size that Sergeant Naughton's talking about. We didn't get complacent, but one of the first things we discovered was even in light of COVID, we have officers out that are still doing Narcan, CPR, applying the AED if appropriate, and we knew that that was going on because when our officers would lean over, especially doing CPR, we would set off that officer down call. So it was a great reminder for everybody that it is there. It's there for their protection. We made some adjustments in the system. The system allowed us to do that. So I don't think we're routinely activating that alarm anymore, or the officer safety alarm, but it was a great reminder for all of us. And I think deep down, all of our community members throughout this country want our law enforcement officers to be safe, because those are the folks that are keeping them safe. And I think it's a good investment.
Yeah, thank you, Chief.
You know, Jason, to extend on that point, you know, the research is pretty clear that the presence of body cameras alters behavior, and we've seen it alter behavior within the workforce and within law enforcement across the United States. But it's equally altered suspect behavior too. And so I was pleasantly surprised as we rolled out body cameras in my previous agency, the number of times whenever a hostile or combative individual changed their posture with law enforcement because of the presence and the acknowledgement of a body camera being activated. And so, you know, if we connect that back to, does that make the community safer, and connected with what Chief Hayes has just said, you know, when the cops, officer safety is elevated, the community's safety is elevated, because at the end of the day, we would all prefer not to use any force, right? And so if we can get voluntary compliance with the law and voluntary compliance with police officers and lawful instructions and carrying out a legitimate law enforcement mission, well, then everybody wins. And I think that the more that this plays out in an operational setting, people will see that is true in their own community as well.
Yeah, thank you for that insight, Chief. You're right that the transparency component is a big factor. Shifting gears a bit, let's talk about other ways agencies can utilize the utility ecosystem to promote safety and situational awareness. Sergeant Naughton, your team has deployed this technology in some outside of the box ways. Can you share some examples of an innovative approach to utilizing this technology?
Sure. We trained with our tactical operations unit and other special operations officers, recognizing that they have unique challenges outside of our regular patrol. We wanted to see how they could use the body cameras more effectively, more efficiently for them, and if there was anything we could do to maybe tailor it really to their unique needs and circumstances. So one of the things that we've done was we worked with a local supplier of tactical vest and gear, created a specially designed pouch for the actual body cameras, and we're able to either use those on the belt or on the actual tactical vest. As you know, they have a lot of stuff already that they're carrying, and we didn't want this to be a misplaced item just somewhere on their body because they were mandated to wear it. So we wanted to actually have function and some purpose. One of the things that we actually did that would make this a little bit more unique and tailored to them was St. Louis County uses a tactical robot. We have a couple of them. We recognized that there was a value to maybe putting this camera on the robot and using it, since it went in, did some searches. It already has a camera attached to it, but with this, we're able to live stream it. We're able to collect the video evidence of the precursory searches that are done. It gives a tactical advantage to the officers. They can kind of already see, you know, what they're going to walk into, what type of obstacles might be in the way, what the layout of the house or structure looks like. So it does give them real-time information and a little bit more of an advantage before they just breach a door and go in. What we also did is we outfitted our trucks with some, they all have tents in them, so we can have private viewing if we need to, or the weather. We can keep ourselves from the weather. The video or the pictures that are displayed there, that's one of our trucks with a RV TV weather rated 50-inch screen next to it. We're able to pull up the actual body cameras on a situation wherever the officers are deployed, and we can pinpoint using, again, that GPS where they are. We can see who's recording, who's not recording. We can see where their vehicles are positioned. So that gives us a real-time mapping advantage as well. So commanders and supervisors that are on the scene at the staging area can see, where any gaps of coverage and containment might be located and redirect personnel as needed. We're also able to live stream that robot that I showed earlier. We're able to live stream it on that. So again, at the staging area where commanders are at, they can actually see what's going on and relay that information to their teams before they enter. You also see in there, we have one of our tactical vehicles, the Bearcat. The magnets that are on these holsters for the body camera. They're ridiculously strong. So you can put these things on and it will stick to the side of that truck. They can drive right up to where they want, position that. So again, we're collecting video evidence of what the front of the scene looks like, or our target scene, and we can have the ability to live stream what's going on there without having personnel actually right there in the vehicle or that close to wherever it was deployed. Some other unique things that we did was, again, using the magnets. We've been able to take the 3.5 foot steel bar, attach the body camera to it, and you can actually use that now as kind of like a periscope, if you would, looking into attics, and you can stream that and collect your evidence of what's up there as well. So anything that's captured on this when you're live streaming, it's recorded and becomes part of the case file later. So that's very unique to this system. We can link everything together, and when you go back to do your after action report, you don't have to try to figure out where everybody was and what everybody was doing. It's already generated. It's already captured right there. So we're trying to take advantage of all of that with our tactical teams.
Chiefs, weigh in here. I know both of you have been in command centers, sitting there trying to gather information. How valuable is this live video streaming function and this technology?
I'll go first and just add another very, very minor example. It's absolutely important. That's what we get paid to do. Those are the decisions that we get paid to make. And sometimes in the years past, we've had to kind of do that in a vacuum and try to listen to radio communications that may not be that clear. And again, we don't have the crime that some other communities do, but a small example of what we did with utility was, I'm going to take all these ideas and we'll try to implement as we can. But in Colorado, for instance, one of the legal requirements would be for cameras is that the officers at the beginning of their shift have to test their camera. If they do that and there's a malfunction, then there's no criminal or post sanctions for the officer. So we, with utilities help, we put together signs at our employee entrance and also as the stop sign as we leave our building before we head out onto the thoroughfare that reminds officers, number one, to stay safe, but also make sure that they've tested their camera. Chief?
Yeah, so when we talk about technical functions, Sarge really brought out some great examples of deployment of the technology in a tactical environment or maybe a non-patrol environment, right? But every chief clearly understands that not only do you have to manage the tactical framework in which is in front of you, you also have to manage the long-term after incident consequences, whether that's going to be case preparation for a criminal trial or it's going to be preparation for civil litigation or any other type of legal action that's going to take place. And so the thing that we haven't talked about that is from a chief's perspective as important as the device itself is the digital evidence management aspect of this solution, right? So that everything is going to a common operating picture. It has the ability to be tagged and designated and watermarked for future consumption. And it's beyond just the videos that were captured, the officer's ability to dismount the camera and then use it as a still photography device to capture crime scene evidence and upload it within the same case packet as the video body worn camera evidence was collected is really, really important, because many times in many jurisdictions, police chiefs are both criminally and civilly liable to make sure that the evidence that is being presented or available is shared through discovery processes and just kind of civil protections that defendants or plaintiffs in an action have access to. And so this elevates the confidence of command that not only are we using the tool in the field to keep our officers safe and collect the evidence, but we're able to operationalize it in a post-incident environment for all the other responsibilities that we have as well.
Yeah, excellent point, Chief. And dovetailing on that a bit, Chief Johnson, your officers have a unique challenge in that they're spread across the country. And what are some of the ways that you're hoping to innovate and use this technology to actually connect your officers?
Yeah, so the first answer would be, just last year we had an officer involved shooting that occurred in a very urban environment. You would think in a large urban city that there'd be the opportunity to get back up there relatively quickly. Well, because the rail network largely runs through communities, but sometimes is just kind of invisible in some parts of the community of kind of where you are. It took us over 20 minutes to get a backup officer to that cop that had just been involved in an OIS. Having the mapping solution, the GPS solution, the live stream solution, all these things that we've already talked about today clearly would help us to connect with those jurisdictions in which we partner with day in and day out to help augment what our officers are facing. But beyond what we've talked about, our department has one of the largest drone programs in the United States for a law enforcement function. And so we're still in aspirational sort of conversations about, okay, how do we help leverage the body-worn camera function, but also the body-worn camera architecture in the background to help house the digital evidence that we're capturing, so that whether it's on the front of a Bearcat, as Sarge talked about, deploying on a tactical scene, or a UAV that is flying over a critical incident, or flushing out potential burglars that are trying to obscure themselves, in the cloak of darkness or in some vegetation, that all of that can be live streamed and brought to us a common operating picture for incident command as they're responding to these issues. And then the final thing would just be how we can help leverage this in maybe non-criminal functions, right? So right now, our team is responding to a large hazmat derailment in Central Texas, where someone struck one of our trains, and having the ability to live stream that event not only would help our officers, it would help our hazmat responders and our other corporate officers, if you will, that have responsibilities to get that situational awareness, because it's impacting that community that we're at right now. And that wasn't the first thought that we had whenever we were selecting body cameras, but quickly, once we get into this conversation, you start to see the value proposition far beyond just that individual officer on that capturing that individual call for service.
So really what you're underscoring the technology oftentimes giving you a reduction in response time, because we all know we've all been there. At some point, you don't know where you are. Maybe you're in a foot pursuit. Yep. And you capture a suspect and you're like, I'm in an alley, there's a blue house, there's a street light, and you're trying to give a description over the radio of where you are. But the goal would be that you're getting the information faster now so that you're able to respond faster. Would that be a good summation?
Absolutely, and I'd add another wrinkle to how you described it. You're trying to describe where you are while out of breath in a foot chase, right? I mean, it's nearly impossible as you're carrying all that gear to have a meaningful radio transmission when you're in the heat of physical exertion, right? And we know that fine motor skills are the first thing that go in a physical exerting incident, whether it's conflict or it's a pursuit or something. And so being able to augment the officer's awareness with technology and extend the support that the dispatching center can offer is critical. But also that the cops themselves, that if you're working with another special agent, in proximity, maybe you're a two-person unit in rural northern Arizona. Not only is dispatch assisting that officer, but his or her partner can also pull up on a Veil web and have that same geographic visualization of just kind of where everybody is, to be able to be to expedite their response as well. And so we're optimistic for what we know that the solution will offer, and also optimistic on just kind of the aspirational applications that we're still just kind of brainstorming, that was beyond just kind of the first cut review.
Yeah,
Jason,
thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Please, Chief, jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to add in that if what we've just been through in this country with COVID, if anything, it's taught us to be more resilient, and that we've got to be prepared for whatever the future brings us. So any time we get a product such as the utility product that allows us to think outside the box and adapt, that's what we're going to need to get through this COVID. And I suspect that while COVID may have lasted about better part of a year, and we're not through it yet, I think the recovery from COVID is probably going to be a couple of years. And so it's about being resilient. It's about working for an organization such as these fine gentlemen do, and also the utility folks. It's about being in an organization that's continuous learning and really a learning environment. What's next? How can we provide better service, not only for our citizens, but also better service for our first responders, to make sure that they're safe? And with the anti-police, anti-government sentiment that's out there, we need to offer the protection that we can.
Good, great point, Chief, on talking about staying cutting edge, staying above the curve, and building on that topic, really of connectivity and response time. Sarge, let's explore how these tools enable you to work with nearby agencies that are also utility users. Does your agency utilize utilities' mutual aid capabilities? And if so, can you share some insight into how this supports your officers and your community?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been using, well, like I said earlier, we went live with our system in January of 2020. Since then, there are 4 of our larger municipalities that have signed on with utility, as well as our neighboring St. Louis City Police Department. We have MOUs with several of those agencies already. I know there's several other municipalities that are still considering the solution for their body cameras. Since they've signed the MOUs and we've been involved with them, and like I mentioned earlier, 58 police agencies just in our county alone. It's easy to misplace people and not know who was where. I've been through our Ferguson event. I was our staging manager there during the initial and follow-up events there. And just tracking officers from other departments was a task all of its own that would have been easily solved by this solution if everybody had the same ones. Having said that, we've had several incidents lately where, since now these other agencies are on board and are nearby, they've actually come into our area, or we've gone into their area, and we can actually provide information now as to which officers were there. Did they get out on foot? Was it vehicle traffic through their city? What areas were searched if you have a missing person? We've shared information with our municipal partners for not just crimes that have just occurred with BOLO alerts and sending photographs and real-time messaging straight to the surrounding officers' body cameras, But we've been able to find, like, send out missing person alerts with photos, descriptions, last known where, and having that ability to do that's something that the radio doesn't give you. I mean, you can put that out, you can do point to point, you can put information out there, but to be sitting in your patrol car 10 miles away from where a stolen vehicle just occurred and have a description of that vehicle read over the air, or having the photo of that particular vehicle sent to you, and now you can physically, see it passing you or whatever, you can put the connect the dots there. I mean, that's just priceless. We've been able to do that a few times, and it's helped us out quite a bit. Again, I mean, we're surrounded by municipal governments with police agencies, and we have to cut through their towns, they have to cut through ours to get places. So that valuable to be able to have the MOU with them.
Thanks for that insight, Sarge. And Chief Hayes, you've leveraged these capabilities in Colorado as well, is that correct?
Yeah, we have. We're certainly much more spread out than I think Sergeant Naughton, his particular part of the country. So what we've done is we've established a Colorado users group. We've got Colorado Springs and El Paso County on the south, Weld County on the north, and then one of our ski towns on the west, and then Louisville. So we get together once a month. We talk about kind of what's next for all of us, what we've learned, what we'd like to pass on to utility, and why we're not geographically, most of us are not geographically connected. We do have that connection with each other, and there's always little tweaks that we can do or things that we've learned about the system that then we're able to share with those other agencies. And it's been great. And we've also not had to pass on any big issues or concerns to utility. It's really more about us learning how to leverage the technology.
Chief Johnson, I can't even imagine your world of relying on other agencies and partnerships with all the jurisdictions that you're in. Do you have any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're precisely right. I mean, I tell people that that I've got a lot of cops, just not a lot in any one location, because we're spread out over so many states. And so partnerships is at the ethos of what we do, and being able to leverage kind of community concerns where our rail operates, and also bring an operational subject matter expertise about some of the challenges that we have to those communities that we run through, and working together, whether it's in the field or through technology, is really, really important to us. But I would also say it's a highlight to highlight the opportunity for the infrastructure for the device itself. So because it is so spread out, that nucleus of technology infrastructure, I think earlier in the call we talked about waypoints and the ability to download files. That's not always a reality for us because we're so spread out. And so having the ability to have not only cellular support, but dual band cellular support to overcome the lack of Wi-Fi infrastructure that we might have from a police headquarters perspective, right, helps us to very financially address the issue of overcoming costly infrastructure needs to be able to build out a system, right? So when you just think of it in terms of radio network communications, NBC network communications, earliest iterations of body camera solutions were piggybacking off of those solutions, not necessarily using a blended approach of cellular and infrastructure Wi-Fi communications. And so not only does the partnerships help us, but the technology lets us operate independently too, where that requirement is also needed.
Yeah, the connected officer. That's really what we're talking about here. Thank you, gentlemen. As we reflect on the discussion today, we certainly understand that situational awareness matters for officers and the communities they serve. With that, I'd like to hear from each of you. What is a recommendation you would make to our attendees who are working to enhance the situational awareness mindset within their agency? And Chief Johnson, back to you. I'll start. What can you offer in that area?
So, for this topic moving forward, I'm just reminded about our model of policing in the United States. And we police by consent, by the consent of the people. And the people have resoundingly told us that this is a technology that they want in their communities. And so we're obliged to comply with that. I mean, Chief Hayes talked about a statutory requirement in Colorado. I think that that's going to cascade across other states. And so the recommendation would be, one, embrace it. Embrace the technology that is out there, but seize the opportunity to use it far beyond just that minimum baseline requirement. Because as we recover from the economic consequences of COVID, what we're seeing is law enforcement agencies all across the United States are being squeezed budgetarily for resources, which in a police organization means headcount. It means cops, right? And so if we're not going to have the growth opportunity within our budgets to add officers to enhance officer safety issues, then we've got to find other solutions to enhance that officer safety. And I think we've just spent the better part of an hour talking about some technological solutions to enhance officer safety that has a lower operating price point than reoccurring staffing costs, right? And so you're elevating that officer safety. You're supporting your cops in the field. You're giving them a tool that not only helps protect them, but helps them prepare better case files and evidence to submit for criminal prosecution. And you're doing it within the fiscal constraints that many of the agencies that I'm talking to right now are experiencing. And so I think it's a win-win if the goal is to achieve something beyond just deploying a video camera, right? How do we leverage that technology in a much more sophisticated way?
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Chief Hayes, also your thoughts on that subject.
Sure, the chief said it all. I think the only thing that I would add to that is when we brought our system on board in 2020, we weren't sure we were going to be able to afford it, and we didn't put in the Incar videos, but we did pre-wire for those. And now we wish we would have bought those at the time. I think we are going to move forward. So again, another layer of protection for our officers. The civil and criminal liability is out there, and that just, again, another layer of protection for officers, what they're seeing out that front window of that police car, and maybe even more important than that, with the dome cameras in those cars, kind of what that communication is between the officer and somebody that he or she may have in custody. Again, it protects everybody, and I think somebody suggested this a little bit earlier. I think, again, we don't have a big problem with complaints in our part of the country, our part of the state, but I think it does make everybody behave better. If you remind the person that there may be a camera in the car, and on the other hand, there may be times when you don't want to let the person know that there's a camera in the car or that it's being recorded, because certainly those spontaneous utterances are also important on occasion for solving crime and trying to get an appropriate conviction in a case.
Thank you, Chief. And Sergeant Naughton, a unique perspective probably from you. I do know your history in responding to the events of Ferguson, Missouri, 2014. We've come a long way in some ways, and then maybe some ways not. Your thoughts on that subject as you reflect?
Well, certainly as we move forward with mandated recordings and body cameras in this country, and you have police agencies struggling to try to figure out how to meet these demands, my recommendations is, on top of what Chief Johnson and what Chief Hayes already said, just do your research on this. Look at what what your minimum requirements are, and then go beyond that. This type of system you can grow with. You can do all kinds of things, like way out of the box. It's more than just a body camera solution. But going back to the Ferguson, being able to document not just in a police report and eyewitness statements of what happened, but having real video accounts of what happened, and being in front of that and being able to get that type of video footage out to the public. Had we had something like this back then, I don't think that Ferguson would have gone on near as long as it did. I think that we would have had more open dialogue with community leaders and a lot of the protest leaders to be able to sit down and actually show them not just an officer's perspective of what they were witnessing, but the eyewitness from the camera footage. I think that would have been invaluable at that time. I know that we certainly are going to be using this technology in future events. We've already had a few protests with our local municipalities here that we've assisted them with, and we've been able to utilize the body camera footage in that manner. So yeah, it's just as we move forward in this country like that with camera systems, certainly I just would recommend that you just do your research, make sure that you're getting what you pay for, make sure that you get a system that can grow with you and your department. Make sure there's something that like the tech support with utility has been beyond words. I can't even describe how great they've been. Our officers have come up with ideas of, hey, this might work better if we could do this versus that. We send them a quick message, and within a week or so, the program is rewritten to help us with that issue. So having somebody in your corner like that, I think is probably what you really want to look at, not just somebody that's trying to sell you something. So, and certainly I'm sure both chiefs would agree that we're more than willing to talk about our experiences, good and bad, with deployments. So reach out to your agencies that are using cameras. Do your research that way as well.
And I would just offer, Tom and Chief, I don't know that I would ever say that we've had a bad deployment. I think it's more we've all learned and things we might do differently. And I think in our case, that's why we put together the users group, so that we can share those. And as we hear about things in Colorado, agencies that are looking at utility, or they're already in their process and kind of narrow it down, we just offer our advice and counsel to them about lessons learned. But in our case, there was certainly nothing bad. It was just things that if we knew what we knew yesterday, we might have done things a little bit differently. But I think that's part of being a lifelong learner as well. Is we just you assume no bad intentions, and you got to move forward, right? That's what the community expects us to do.
Gentlemen, I sincerely thank you for the insight and the key takeaways today. And I thank all of you for attending today's webinar. If you have a follow-up question that you would like answered, please email us at marketing@utility.com, and we will respond to you immediately. To each of our panelists, I want to reiterate how proud we are at Utility to serve as a strategic partner for your agencies. And the information you shared is an invaluable resource for those listening today. We'll share a recap of this video and the conversation, and we will welcome your feedback in our survey to follow. On behalf of the entire team at Utility Incorporated, thank you for making the time to join us today. Stay safe, and we hope to see you at our next webinar event. Back to you, John.
Thanks, Chief. And again, I would like to thank all our attendees for joining us today, and in particular our panelists and Utility for this robust discussion, and also for your continued support of law enforcement and the FBI National Academy Associates. So thank you very much. Today's webinar will also be archived on our website at www.fbinaa.org. So please stay safe and well. Hope to see you soon.